Thanks for coming to hear about quote-to-cash solution architecture. My name is Carl O'Brien-Ibar. Quick thank you to our sponsors. All you have to do is just flip over your name tag. You'll see all these guys. So be sure to stop by their tables. And I'm going to shout out a couple of these guys a little bit later. Quick intro on me, Carl O'Brien-Ibar. I am a quote-to-cash solution architect. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 15 years. I've been focusing exclusively on the CPQ tool for the last 10 years, which is crazy to say. Over that time, I've delivered probably around 150 projects. I stopped counting at about 100. So I'm really excited to share the things that I've learned during that time. So let's start with some of the common challenges. So we're going to talk about all these guys at the top as we go through today's discussion. So we're going to talk about why we have some of these and how to overcome some of those challenges. The challenge that I think this really boils down to when you're implementing a tool like CPQ is the fact that everyone cares about this tool. You are either consuming information from CPQ or you are contributing information to CPQ or a combination of the two. As you introduce a tool like CPQ, you get way more stuff than you were ever capable of doing before. And that's a really difficult process to manage and to understand what parts of that package you're going to use and how you're going to use those parts. So in order to figure that out, you have to ask questions that you never asked before. You also have to ask questions that you have asked before in ways that you've never considered. So it's a really interesting thought exercise to get all of the information from the process that you need. Also, there's going to be people who own specific parts of the process that you need to get their information out of their heads and into the actual process. That's difficult in and of itself. Also, as you introduce and decide what parts of the tool you're going to use, there's going to be disagreements about what you should be doing. And when there are agreements about what you should be doing, there will be disagreements about how you should be doing those things. So it's really important to understand all of the parts of the process so that you can navigate that correctly. Most important than anything, it's important to remember that you can overcome all of these challenges. You absolutely can be successful with implementing a tool like CPQ. You just have to be conscientious about how you're doing that. So how are we going to be successful with CPQ? This breaks down into three main areas for today: data, experience, and implementation. Everything that we're talking about today could be its own session. There are also things that I'm not including today that I just don't have time to talk about. So if there's something that you want to hear more about or something that I didn't touch on that you want to hear more about, hit me up after. Let's make sure that we talk about those things. So starting with data. The thing that I want everybody to remember about data is the idea of generosity. There is not a single user in the system that doesn't produce information or update information that isn't consumed by someone else. There isn't a person in the company that produces or updates information that isn't going to be consumed by someone else. So it's important that we're all doing the best that we can to achieve success with our individual parts of the process so that when other people are relying on the data that we're creating and updating, that they can rely on the accuracy of that data and that they can make the best possible decisions from that data. So thinking about how data comes together, the really interesting thing about CPQ, and I'm going to use the term CPQ as just a general lead to cache, quote to cache term. The thing about CPQ is that you're putting together data from lots of different parts of the system. And so when we're thinking about generosity, I think all of us probably remember the story Stone Soup that we were taught as a kid. It's a really great way to teach kids about sharing and generosity, and it's a really great lesson to teach. However, when we think about the realistic application of that story in a CPQ process, it's just chaotic. You have a random person sitting on the side of the road with a rock and a pot, and they're waiting for random passerbys to have produce in their pockets that they can just add to the soup. That's crazy. No one wants to eat that soup, right? So rather than thinking about the stone soup idea of contribution, we should all really be curating our data contributions with a Michelin star aspect. And for those of you who are foodies, Denver does have some new Michelin star restaurants, and I would very much recommend that you take the opportunity to dine at those if you have the chance. So at a Michelin star restaurant, you have a chef at the top who has an idea that everyone in that restaurant is executing on. You have a clear process where here are the recipes that I'm trying to execute, the dishes that I'm trying to execute. There are different people in the kitchen who are all contributing different components to those dishes. Some people contribute more components than others. Some people contribute different components than others. Everyone's contributions is extremely important because it comes together to make the thing that we eat at the end of the day, right? You also have people in that kitchen who are largely using the same tools. Like everybody has a knife roll, but depending on what part of the kitchen you're in, you might be using different tools to execute your components, right? So I think it's pretty clear which one of these approaches is going to give you the best results, right? So how do we think about that Michelin star approach when we're thinking about our lead to cash process? So lead to cash is something that, again, it touches every single part of the process. So starting from the idea of lead generation, how do we introduce ourselves to people that might not know who we are? How do we educate those people about our offering? How do we entice them to engage in a transaction with us? As we are managing that transaction, what do we do to manage our configuration? What are our pricing and discounting strategies? How do we get that onto a piece of paper so that a customer can review that and accept that? And then we can move into our order management process where we're now collecting revenue, where we're handling items like inventory and fulfillment, then moving out into contract and subscription management. Most people care about a tool like CPQ because it gives you the ability to manage a subscription revenue process. So thinking about your renewal process and your amendment process are incredibly important in there. And then eventually flowing out into a potential customer service aspect or a field service aspect. Not everyone uses these things, but if you're going to be successful with customer service and field service, you have to be making sure that all of your data flows through this process correctly so that it can be consumed by the next part of the process, and that process can be successful with the thing that they're trying to accomplish in that particular part. I have these two areas here highlighted, product and pricing and CPQ here. These are the only areas of the process where a tool like CPQ is giving you specific functional support. However, CPQ is consuming all of the upstream information from leads and sales management, and it is producing all of the information that ends up getting consumed by your orders and subscriptions. So if you're not considering what needs to happen in each individual component of your process and how that needs to be consumed by the next part, you're never going to be able to keep that chain of custody for that data flow. Key players, who's cooking in our kitchen. So we have a lot of different people that care about lots of parts of this process. So when you think about, like, we see sales caring about a couple of different parts here, finance, rev ops caring about different parts, some overlap, some different, customer success. So there are different groups of people in this process that are going to be consuming information that gets produced by other people, right? And producing information that gets consumed by others downstream. Thinking about the tools, this is where I want to do a shout out for our sponsors real quick. There are a couple sponsors here that you can use to expand your CPQ capabilities. Britta here in the front is with Logic, and a tool that I'm particularly fond of and use pretty much on a daily basis. So definitely take the time to stop by and ask any questions that you might have there. And then last but not least, hurdles. So each part of the process has its own challenges, but the thing that you see as a commonality throughout the process is the idea of data integrity, data completeness, data accuracy, data integrity. if you don't have good, accurate, complete data, you can't possibly be making the best decisions because all of your decisions are based on the data that you're looking at. And again, a tool like CPQ, which we see kind of encapsulated here, is the, again, large consumer and producer of this information. So if you're not, if you don't have a good roadmap, you don't have a firm idea of what you're trying to accomplish, that's going to cause you to make a lot of different changes. You're going to change your product architecture. You're going to change your pricing strategy. You're going to change your discounting strategy. As you change those things, that causes an extreme cascade effect on the rest of your data and causes you to have to spend a lot of time and effort translates to money for those of you who are reading between the lines. You have to spend a lot of time and effort to make the changes, not only to this area here, but also to all of the changes that are going to be made to the rest of that architecture just based on the changes that you make here. So it's really important to understand what your roadmap is, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, so that you understand the consequences and the implications of the decisions that you're making. The other thing that we see here, if you check out these little numbers here, just because I can't remember all the counts on each one. So we've talked about a process which incorporates 32 individual components, which all have their own best practices, which all have their own metrics, which all have their own concerns. We've talked about 13 different user groups who all care about different parts of the system, who all want to consume different information from those different parts of the system. We've talked about 27 different potential tools that you can use to expand your capabilities around that process, and 28 different hurdles that you're going to encounter as you're implementing this process. So there are 100, and that's not even everything, right? More than 100 individual things that you have to be aware of, understand what the goals are, what the best practices are, what the hurdles are, so that you can achieve success with every single part of the process. Ignore parts of the process to your own peril. All right, so let's think about experience. Experience is where we now see the effect of our data decisions on actual people, right? So the first thing that I want to talk about with experience is the idea of product architecture. Product architecture can be very simple. It can be very complex. It's typically a combination of simple and complex. So on the most simple side that we're all probably familiar with is the fast food meal deal. We go through the drive-thru, we buy number one and number two that comes with a burger, chicken sandwich, French fry, and a drink, right? So what we're doing is buying one product, which is composed of 3 different components, which is being offered for one single price. We also have the ability to buy any one of those individual components by itself. And the price for that individual component is going to be higher than it would be if we're buying it inside of this bundle, right? You also have the ability to make simple decisions about the construction of your bundle. So I could say, hey, you know what? Can you just make that larger? Can we supersize that, right? Or like, hey, can we just add an apple pie? You know, like I'm transporting myself back 15 years to when McDonald's apple pies were actually good, right? But yeah, hey, you know what? I have a little bit of a sweet tooth today, so throw an apple pie on that for me, right? So you have the ability to make some decisions in that, but they are much simpler decisions. Then you think about the idea of manufacturing. Manufacturing is the most complex application of configuration. You have many more individual components. You have many more relationships between those components. So your family tree has now expanded to include grandparents, great-grandparents, many more siblings, many different layers of cousins, right? Lots of different components in there. As you are considering how to work with those components, there's also going to be many more rules which need to be defined and executed within those bundles. Also, you have a larger need for external integrations. So particularly for manufacturing, you're going to be integrating out into fulfillment, inventory, like those more technical systems. And so understanding the totality of your bundle structure and how that needs to be constructed so that you can give everything that you need to your back-end systems on the integration side, but you're not cluttering up the actual documents that you're putting in front of your customer. You want those documents to be very clean, very easy to understand, and not have 3,000 different line items, right? You probably want like 2 or 3. So when we go and buy, a BMW 325, there's not, brake assembly and seats and this color, blah, 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 all this different stuff. It's just BMW 325, and this is the price that you're going to pay for that, right? So when you're thinking about your product architecture, the thing to think about is what hard requirements do you have? What legal requirements, what laws do you need to follow? What regulations do you need to follow? Is there a specific need for architecture to support external integrations? Those hard requirements should be the first the highest priority requirements to satisfy when you are thinking about your product architecture. After you satisfy those requirements, then you can think about the best possible user experience and customer experience inside of those boundaries. It doesn't matter how good your customer experience is if it's causing you regulatory issues, that you're going to run into fines, that you're going to lose these deals because you didn't do something that you had to do. Right? And a tool like CPQ can be the enforcer of those regulations, but you have to inform the process that is an important thing to consider, right? Next, pricing and discounting. So both product architecture and pricing and discounting, they are a blend of the idea of data, because you do have to structure these things in an appropriate way, but also the effect of those architecture decisions end up being the experience that your users have and the eventual experience that your customers have. So a really interesting thing to think about as you're introducing a tool like CPQ is just the crazy amount of functionality that you're going to get. And the really cool thing, but also a double-edged sword, is that you're going to be able to say yes to way more stuff that you used to have to say no to, because you didn't have the technical capabilities of supporting those requests. Okay, so if we think about this is a list of just your basic pricing functionality and discounting functionality that you're going to get with a tool like CPQ. 9 different pricing mechanisms, 11 different discounting mechanisms. If you combined all of the different combinations of these items, you have over 1 million combinations. Luckily for you, you can't actually combine all these things. But if you did combine the things that you could actually realistically combine together, you still have thousands of combinations, right? Which is why it's important that when you're thinking about protecting your margin and maximizing your revenue, that you have to understand the cumulative effect of your pricing and discounting strategies. Many pricing strategies will curve down the price of units as you start getting into higher volumes. You also have different discounting strategies, which on top of just manual discretionary discounting that I can get, hey, I'm going to give you 10% off on this deal. You also have automatic mechanisms, which are, again, you also have volume discounts, you have term discounts, you have promotional discounts. You have all of these different mechanisms that can potentially come together. So if you're not understanding the consequence of combining 3, 4, 5 different strategies together, and you're also not taking steps to prevent these things from being combined together, you can find yourself in negative margin territory extremely quickly. And I don't know if you know this, you can't sell your way out of negative margins, right? Hey, I'm losing $1 a deal. I'm going to make it up on volume. Don't worry about it. All right. So what can we do to combat the overuse of discounting? So the one thing, like perceived value, extremely important. Fashion houses, Prada, Louis, you ever see those on sale? No, you don't, because they're luxury brands that have that protected value. The other thing that you can do in instances where you have a cultural expectation or maybe an industry expectation that there is going to be discounting, you can combat that by a psychological trick where you offer an individual or a small number of products for free, for a 100% discount. That allows that psychological itch gets scratched real hard when you see the word free. And I think we can all think about purchases that we've made that were influenced by something that I'm going to get for free, right? So that allows you to satisfy that discounting need or that urge from your customer side without giving away the farm, right? The other thing that you can do, approvals, really, really important mechanism to use, especially when you have a lot of discretionary discounting. Discretionary discounting in general can be a very strong motivator, but if it's your only tool, everything you see is going to be a nail, right? It's your only hammer. So to combat that, create some approval structure which allows your user the flexibility that they feel that they need to successfully navigate their sales process, but that gives you some internal check and balance to make sure that they're not over discounting. The other thing that you can do to maximize revenue, and this is something that I advise most of my customers, if not all, just increase your prices. If you can increase your price and it's not going to negatively impact your ability to close deals, you're leaving money on the table. Every bit of that margin is money on the table. And on average, companies in the US can increase prices almost up to 30%. Almost up to, the actual metric is 29. I put 25 because 29 sounds crazy. I don't know. And in other areas of the world, it's much higher than that. So think about what your strategy actually is and run the appropriate analysis to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward, not only in terms of being able to close that business, but also be able to generate the amount of revenue that you want to be generating, right? And don't leave money on the table. So that brings us to user experience. So user experience here is largely our salespeople who are going to be interacting with our customer and making sure that they are able to navigate that process as smoothly as possible. So how do we make sure that they're able to navigate that smoothly? One way is with the simple idea of just creating a good system, right? Make sure that the system is easy to use, intuitive, all of those sorts of things. I'm not going to spend too much time there because everybody knows that kind of stuff, right? But the thing that I think people really, they fail to recognize the importance as they are making decisions during the project, that your actual training and change management budget is extremely important. That part of the budget is the first part that gets taken from when someone wants more functionality. It doesn't matter if your system can do 5 more things if your users aren't trained on how to use it. Even the golden gun needs training on how to shoot it and how to maintain it, right? So be very cautious about the consequences of the decisions that you make, especially as it relates to your change management process and the effectiveness of that effort. This is something that I really want to, I'm feeling myself like, God, I talked about this for 10 more minutes. I can't. I really want to, I can't. So I will just say, formal change management is something that people almost always underestimate the value of the effect of that part of the budget. So please, as you are selling deals, make sure that change management is included. I'm looking at you. As you are navigating your projects and delivering your projects, make sure that you're not stealing from yourself and limiting your ability to be successful later, okay? Which brings us to customer experience. So let's jump into these shoes, right? So I know that when I'm a customer, I have extremely high expectations. I want them to know about me. I want them to pronounce my name right, right? I want them to tailor that experience to me as much as possible. And I know that when that doesn't happen, that I'm much more willing to just stop that process. I'm just not going to buy anything. Or if I have to execute that deal, I'm going to do it with somebody else. I'm going to do it with somebody who is going to give me the right experience. And the more woe to you if you don't provide that good experience. And the converse is also true. If you are able to provide that good experience, you're going to have more people executing those deals. You're going to have more people coming back to you to do repeat business. When they come back to you to do repeat business, they're going to buy for larger dollars than they did in the beginning. They're also going to tell their friends about you, right? Repeat and referral business is the absolute cheapest business to win. The most expensive business to win are from new people that we're trying to influence to do business with us. So provide that good experience, maintain your customer base, increase your repeat business wherever you can, and increase your influence on the relationships to your customers so that you can bring in some referral business as well. We started with process, right? We started with process. Every part of this process matters. Everything that you do with messaging has to align with what you're actually doing in the sales process. What you're doing in the sales process has to align with the things that customer actually cares about, right? So if you are breaking that chain at any portion, then you are, again, just diminishing your ability to be successful at the end of the day. Every decision matters. Every decision matters. So, implementation. How much time do we have? Awesome. All right. Implementation. How do we put all of this together? How do we actually make this work? So, every single CPQ project that you're doing with a consultant starts with an SOW. That SOW basically says, I want to accomplish these things, and I want to pay this amount of money, right? And usually, the motivation for a company to consider implementing CPQ is kind of two major things. The first one is, what we're doing right now, it's too crazy. We have all these different spreadsheets. It's too hard. Everything's too hard. We have to simplify this. The other thing is, you know what? This isn't giving me what I need. I need more ability to do pricing. I need more ability to do discounting. I need more ability to do whatever it is, right? So we need to invest in a tool that's going to give me the ability to do that. And so part of it is, hey, we need to simplify, and part of it is we need more complexity, right? So those seem kind of at odds, and in some ways they are. But it's, as you are navigating the implementation, it's really important to balance those two motivations because they both are valid and they both are important. And so the SOW is the initial way of agreeing what our first stop is going to be. But as you enter into your CPQ implementation, you're going to go through a discovery process which uncovers a lot of stuff that wasn't even on that SOW. Right? And so that doesn't mean that we have to say yes to all those things right now, but we have to identify what part of those are going to be very important and create a structure which is going to allow us to accomplish those things at some point in the future, whether that be next month or next year or in 3 years, right? With very complex implementations, you often have to have a strategic roadmap so that you can accomplish everything that you need to, but also to understand the prioritization of that effort and make sure, again, that you're not stealing from future parts or making it harder for you to accomplish those future desires. The other thing to remember is that lots of people are going to come to you and they're going to say, I need to do this. I want to be able to, I need a field, or I need a flow. They're going to ask you for something specific. What you need to remember is that they are not admins. They are not CPQ experts. Their wants are often less relevant or irrelevant to our total needs, right? So it's not wants and needs. It's needs and wants. And you have to remember that with a tool like CPQ, there's lots of different ways to accomplish the outcomes that you want and the behaviors that you want. So don't pay attention to specific requests, again, unless it's something that is supporting a regulatory requirement or a legal requirement or something like that, right? Always pay attention to those things. But if they're just, oh yeah, I want a field, so hey, Don't worry about it. Tell me what you're trying to accomplish. I'll make sure that I'll make this system accomplish the thing that you want, right? So not all desires are on the roadmap. And it's really important to not let your road trip get distracted by side quests that prevent you from reaching your final destination, right? It's, of course, fun to have road trips and fun to take side quests, but if you're not going to actually get to where you need to be, you've just defeated your own purpose. All right, so one of my favorite stories, Vienna Sausage Factory. The thing about implementation that is so fun, that I love the challenge of solving this puzzle, is that this is your opportunity to understand your process and to try to streamline it and create efficiencies wherever you can. The other really interesting thing is that the effect of the decisions that you make are often unclear until you actually start to analyze those effects, okay? So the Vienna Sausage Company, 10 minutes? Hell yeah, all right, perfect. All right, so Vienna Sausage Company, super old company, started in the early 1900s. In the late 60s, they decided, hey, we're gonna take our factory, we're gonna make a whole brand new factory. Their existing factory was crazy, completely inefficient, completely old, you couldn't even believe it. There was one old guy whose entire job was to stack sausages on a cart and take a 30-minute walk through the factory and drop them off in a different place. That was his whole job. Sounds crazy. Why would you even do that? Let's get rid of that right away, right? So 1970 rolls around, they have this new factory, they start production from the line. What's happening? The sausages have the wrong color. They have the wrong texture. They can't figure out what's happening. Months go by. They test the water. They test the air. They're pulling their hair out. They can't figure it out. Some executives are just shooting the breeze one day, talking about the old factory, talking about the old cast of characters. They bring up old Irving, who was such a nice guy, but his job was to wheel those sausages 30 minutes through the factory, through high temperature rooms, through high humidity rooms. The light bulb goes off. Oh, this is what is actually making the sausages what we want it to be. We've defeated ourselves by looking for efficiency. Oh, gosh, can't believe it. 2 years later, they fixed the problem. So, moral of the story, you have to ask all the right questions. And even for things that are seemingly, why would you even do that? That sounds so dumb. Let's get rid of that right now. Sure, great. Let's go ahead and get rid of inefficiencies. But understand the effect of the process that you're actually dealing with, right? And if you are removing the outcomes and behaviors that you want as part of your streamlining, there's no efficiency there. There's no efficiency there. Something to keep in mind, Chesterton's fence, although it isn't specifically applicable to this story, if there is something in your system which obviously had a purpose at one time, don't just remove it without understanding what that purpose was, right? Ask the correct questions, understand those answers, take those answers, and put together a good process. All right, last but not least, contractually obligated to do my little marketing part here. So, tools like CPQ, they're super difficult. They're super difficult. They are typically so difficult that it's hard to find the person to add to an internal team to allow you to make that effort. You can find some unicorns and you can find some people who have that ability. It's much harder. So for the purposes of tools like these, it is an interesting idea to consider using a partner because you have the ability to come in and execute a purpose-specific effort. And you can use, I think we're all familiar with AppExchange. AppExchange has an area where you can look for consultants and find the people that have the right skills. I don't know Marketing Cloud. If you ask me to do a Marketing Cloud project, I'd say no, because I don't have that skill. So it doesn't matter if you have somebody who has a different skill, you need this skill. Also, Super important to work with a partner who understands your long-term goals and who isn't just going to say yes to everything. Good partners tell you no. Good partners tell you no more often than you would want to hear the words no. When they tell you no, it is because we are trying to accomplish these other high priority items that you have identified that's important to accomplish, right? So make sure that you're working with people that are appropriately skilled. Make sure that you work with people that you agree on that long-term vision. And last but not least, like I said, I have a lot of other stuff that I want to talk about. This is all the list of stuff that I had to cut out of here. So I'd love to talk more. And like I said, if you guys have more questions, please feel free. And I'll leave you, we've had some philosophical quotes in here. I want to leave you with one modern day philosopher who was taken from us too early. An escalator can never break. It can only turn into stairs. So what questions do we have? Yes.
So my company's been using CPQ for a while. Mm-hmm. We're 15 years old. We've had a lot of product developments. We've done a lot of acquisitions. By my count, we were using about half of the pricing and the discounting methodologies on your screen.
This one's for you right here.
Yeah.
Org merges.
So my question is, we have a lot of complexities, problems we can't figure out, difficulties implementing price increases, problems with invoicing, and just from your knowledge, do we focus more on we should implement CPQ better, or more on the business process side of we need to simplify our discounting and our product offerings?
What I heard the most important thing that I heard from what you just said is revenue leakage.
Yes.
Like if you're not collecting the revenue that your customers have already agreed to pay you, like that seems like probably the first
big problem.
Probably the first thing. From there, like you can try to do the work back of understanding like where do our pricing or discounting mechanisms, do they exacerbate that problem? Because to me, like first is like what's our RevOps process and how can we collect that? How can we eliminate revenue leakage? And then do we have something inside of our architecture which is causing that problem? And if not, okay, great, we can solve that problem, move that. Then we can figure out where is, to me, revenue is the maximum thing. So if your pricing and discounting structures are what is leading to those issues, then that would be the second, most important thing. But if you're not even getting the money that people have promised you, go get that money and then worry about the next thing.
So start at CPQ, depending on what we discover, change our business processes.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Whoever.
I think from a little bit of experience that I've had with some CPQ projects, I'm not the person as much on the hands-on configuration, but one of the keys I think was trying to, and I think with all the things you spoke about, if you can actually break up back to the roadmap into different chunks and do different pieces of a CPQ deployment, but that's the art, I think. It's not very easy, and it's also hard with the clients, right? To be able to say, let's only do this one piece, and then we'll add and add and add. Curious to your thoughts. How do you navigate that, and are you always striving for small chunks of implementation, or do you get forced into big bang?
So my strategy for discovery is, I think, one of the biggest differences between the way that I would approach a project and the way that I've seen other folks approach. I often ignore the SOW, right? The SOW is you need to make sure that you accomplish those things in there, but if you only pay attention to the SOW, you're going to miss a lot of the other things that are necessary to build into that roadmap. So I tell people very specifically, during discovery, I'm going to ask you a bunch of stuff. I'm going to be annoyingly nosy because I need to understand what are all the different parts. Because if there's something that would need to be done specifically so that billing or invoicing can happen correctly, just like the comment that I just made, that's super important. I don't care that my SOW doesn't include that. I have to create a structure which is going, if it doesn't do it now, It has to allow for that to be done in the future. The only way that you can know that it's being allowed to be done in the future is if you identify that as something that needs to be accomplished and create a pathway to actually accomplish that. If it's not on the pathway, it doesn't exist.
So we're looking to implement CPQ probably starting in our next fiscal year. Mm-hmm. You talked at the beginning of the presentation about some of the things that need to be in place before you even start, like data accuracy, data integrity. Mm-hmm. How much of that should we start on our own before we pull in an implementation partner versus having the implementation partner help us with some of that?
Okay. There's going to be, when you start with a project like CPQ, every partner is going to ask you for like typically the same sorts of things. Give me your product list. Give me what price books you have. Give me your pricing and discounting strategies. Like how do those apply to your rules, or excuse me, to your products? What rules do you have inside of your products? What are your approval criteria going to be? What are your documents going to look like? What goes on those documents? What are the legal terms and conditions on those documents? What happens after we close a deal? These are all things that you should be able to understand your process enough to know these are the products that we want to sell. Here's how we want to sell them. Here's the rules that need to be applied down the list. What happens is that people have these items in silos, and they don't know that other people disagree with them until you ask the question. So it's not just a matter of getting everything together. It's a matter of getting everyone together and navigating through those disagreements and those misalignments are where a partner can help you, because a partner is an independent third party that has no allegiance to anyone in that company. Bill in finance could go, I just don't like you, so I'm going to disagree with your idea, right? But he doesn't know me, and I don't care if he doesn't like me, right? Because I'm telling you what needs to happen for the success of your system. And Bill, your ideas are great, but you need to come to the center. It's that old country song, meet in the middle, right? You start coming my way, I'll start coming yours, we'll meet in the middle.
So with your knowledge of CPQ, what is one of your best advantages for a company our size, that we can go back to our higher managers and say we need this because... so like why would you want it? Why would you want a company like, or a tool like CPQ, or why would you want to work with a partner? Why would we want CPQ?
Oh, okay. So it usually comes down to 5 to 7 major motivations. I have a complex product architecture, and I need to handle configuration and rule execution within that. I have complex pricing and discounting strategies. I have complex approval, condition, and like evaluation need. I have complex document generation needs. I have any sort of renewal need, right? Renewal or amendment need. Those are typically going to be like your main motivators. For me, the most important one from that is the idea of subscriptions. You can handle, you can get away with not having CPQ to do some product architecture, some pricing stuff. As you start increasing in complexity, the need for a tool like that becomes more, because your ability to internally create systems and tools that will produce those outcomes is much less. It's a very, very few companies have that technical skill on staff. So in order to extend that technical skill, you need to think about introducing a tool like CPQ, and in order to expand your delivery capability of those projects, that's why you need a partner. Any other? Yeah, I can hear you.
This is more around implementation of CPQ. Salesforce is evolving with CPQ in terms of bringing in Omni Studio. And industries is also coming to the fold, to the core with revenue lifecycle management, all that. How do you make sure that the solution that you're building with your SI is in alignment with Salesforce roadmap and that you're not creating unnecessarily tech debt a couple of years down the road once you're done with the CPQ project?
So I don't know if you had the opportunity to see Ian Gotts's session yesterday. If you didn't, I would recommend watching the recording on that, because he goes into the idea of tech debt and like navigating that process. But the comment that he made during that session, which I think is most relevant here, is Salesforce forces tech debt on you 3 times a year, right? So you have to have, like, if you're working with Salesforce, you should have a process that reviews and makes decisions on how to navigate those new aspects of the platform, right? So if you already have a process which handles the changes that you're expecting, then you can use that same process to handle the changes that come as part of your implementation. But it all, like, the answer to most of my questions is usually comes down to process and systems. If you have a good process and you have a good systems to support that process, then your outcomes are on average going to be way better than everyone else's. Because most people don't think about what is my process and what are my systems to be successful with each part of my process. Anybody else? All right, great questions. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So I am on LinkedIn if you guys want to grab that there, or I'll be around a little bit today if anyone has any other questions. But thank you. I really appreciate everyone coming. Thank you.